So hello everybody and welcome. I'm Mark from Brain or Shine and I'm missing Jules tonight. So if any of you regulars are with us and thinking, where's Jules? She's actually got a meeting this evening, a last minute meeting. So she says hello to everybody and she's going to miss you all, chatting to you all as well tonight. And we have a very special guest. We have Hannah from our amazing partners at Slater and Gordon, who I'll let you introduce yourself in a sec, Hannah. But thanks for coming along and giving up your evening for us. Really appreciate that.
Yes, no problem. Hi,
Cool.
everybody. So my name is Hannah. I'm an associate at Slater and Gordon Lawyers, and I'm part of the travel team. So this is my presentation on travel law, just to introduce travel law to you if you're not familiar with it. And I'll be taking you through what travel law is, how we can assist our clients, and then putting that into the context of some case studies at the end.
Fantastic. So just a quick overview of what happens tonight. I know some of you have joined us regularly, but if it's your first time here, welcome. Brain or Shine, we're here to help people affected by brain injury. And it's not just people with the brain injury, it's the people around the people with the brain injury as well. So I have the brain injury. I'm very high functioning. I don't have any physical disabilities. And when I tell people I have a brain injury, they go, I wouldn't have known. And I'm sure a lot of you get that as well if you're in the same situation as me. Jules, my wife, who we set a Brain or Shine together, we both have to deal with the after effects of brain injury every single day, which is chronic fatigue, memory loss, confusion, mood swings, and all those sort of things that you guys know all about. So that's pretty much who we are. I'm particularly keen to hear what Hannah's got to say about travel law on the basis that I sustained my brain injury in the Canary Islands. And some of you regulars know our story, but I basically blacked out in a restaurant in a tapas bar, fell and hit my head, and have absolutely no memory of that at all. We had to have a sort of 24 hours of confusion because even though I came around and I could talk, I don't have any memory or any knowledge of what was going on. So then Jules had to go through the whole process of going to hospital, sitting in the front of an ambulance with me in the back of an ambulance. We were taken to a hospital on the island that Jules had no idea geographically where we were on the island, but it was obviously a journey because it took about 45, 50 minutes to get there. Then she had the language barrier to deal with in the hospital. And then I was discharged from the hospital with an ear infection, put in a taxi and taken back to the hotel. And when we got back to the hotel, Jules then had to spend about an hour getting me from the taxi to the hotel room because I just wanted to sit down and sleep, basically. So I have no memory or recollection of that until I woke up the next morning. And then, long story short, I had 2 doctor's visits, and then I was cleared to fly home, despite the fact I had a severe brain injury. And at no point had I had any x-rays, any scans, anything like this at all. So being in a foreign country that didn't really have great resources, so to speak, it was really, really scary. And thankfully, everything worked out in the end. But we could have been in a seriously bad situation there. And we both had to deal with that, especially Jules had to deal with that really, really well and keep everything together. So I think having gone through that process and having many years to think about it afterwards, I wish I'd have known Hannah at Slater and Gordon 13 years ago. Excuse me. So yeah, we're really keen to find out what you've got to say about this, and also just hopefully advise anybody on how to deal with this process. Hopefully, it never comes up, but you just never know, do you? But I'm going to hand over to you, Hannah, anyway, and get you to give these lovely people some more information and expertise.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the introduction and thank you for having me. So, like I say, I'm associate at Slater and Gordon Lawyers in the travel department. So, the areas that we cover are usually, well, largely personal injury, and it's about injury that happens abroad as a result of somebody else's negligence. So, outside of the jurisdiction of England and Wales. And that can come in many forms like road traffic incidents, package holidays, incidents during the course of employment if you're working abroad, public places, clinical negligence, incidents on aircrafts or incidents on boats, and even assaults as well. And whilst personal injury is our sort of main forte, having an incident abroad can be really scary in any sort of context. And so I would always say that if you are unsure, if you're not too sure on where to go or how to start, or just looking for some general advice, even if you don't think that it's something that's within our sort of wheelhouse of personal injury, feel free to contact us and we'll always try and point you at least in the right direction to give you that starting point, so that you know what your options are, you know who to speak to, who the relevant people are, and we'll always try our best. So I thought I'd start by talking about the differences between incidents in England versus incidents abroad. And from an individual's perspective, having an incident abroad can add a lot more fear and anxiety. You're in a foreign country, you don't know what the standard of care is there. What is the standard that you're going to receive in that hospital? How are you going to pay for it all? How are you getting home? Those language barriers as well. So these are all things that can add that extra fear and anxiety, so that some would say an incident abroad could be worse than having an incident in England. So Slater and Gordon can actually assist with some of these fears and anxieties to help lessen them. Obviously, can't resolve them, but hopefully lessen them. And the key to this is early intervention. So speaking to a law firm like Slater and Gordon, who specialises in travel litigation, we can provide practical advice on matters such as repatriation, so getting the injured party home, the best method how, covering foreign medical costs as well, and how to cover them, and even gathering evidence while still in the resort. So two of my key pieces of advice that I'd give to anybody is travel insurance and the global health insurance card, or the GHIT card as some people like to call it. So travel insurance is something that I will scream about till the cows come home. I think it's so important whenever anybody's traveling abroad, because they can offer so much to you, so much benefit to you should the worst happen. They can cover the cost of repatriation, which can be really costly, which can include things like private ambulance transfers. It can include flights home. You'll usually have some sort of medical professional with you during the whole journey, door to door, as well. Um, and you'll also have obviously the medical professionals giving you fit to fly certificates to make sure that you are suitable to be transported home. Travel insurance can also cover your foreign medical costs as well. Um, so speaking to them from early doors is really important, and that would be the first tip that I'd give to anybody. And it's the first thing that I'd say to any client is, do you have travel insurance? Have you contacted them? Have you spoken to them? The other advice that I would give is in relation to the global health insurance card. Now, for those who don't know what that is, it replaces the European health insurance card, and it's something that you can apply for online. It's free, it lasts for 5 years, and it allows you to gain the same healthcare as somebody who's in that jurisdiction. So, say for example, somebody who is domiciled abroad or living abroad, they'd only have to pay maybe £100 excess to get unlimited healthcare. With that card, you'd be entitled to the same. So you'd have to pay the £100 excess, and then you'd get entitled to free healthcare in that country. Now, there are caveats to that, in the sense that it has to be sort of emergency healthcare. It has to be healthcare is defined as healthcare that cannot wait, or reasonably wait until you come back to the UK. So you can't just go for any old reason. It has to be obviously a emergency situation. But I think it's really vital for people who don't have travel insurance as a fallback position, because that can help you cover the cost of foreign medical costs. It doesn't cover repatriation costs, though, so please bear that in mind, but it does cover foreign medical costs, and it can apply retrospectively as well. So if you've not had that card, gone abroad, the worst has happened, you can then still apply for it and ask them to cover your medical fees that you've already incurred. We can also assist by directing the individual or family to the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office, the British Embassy, or the consulate, whichever is appropriate in the circumstances, to help give practical advice whilst you're on the ground. And we can also liaise with foreign lawyers as well to provide advice on incident reporting requirements. So in each country, to report an incident officially, maybe to the police or to an appropriate party, it's going to vary from country to country. So it's best to get advice from a foreign lawyer early doors so they can properly advise you whilst you are still in resort, and then can give you any other relevant steps that you need to take or information that you need to know whilst you're in that foreign jurisdiction to assist in the pursuit of a claim. So there's a lot that Slater and Gordon can do for an individual early doors before we even talk about making a claim. And that's all to try and help with those fears and anxieties that come with having an incident abroad. So I thought it would be helpful to set out an overview of the claims process from a travel perspective, to give you insight as to the different stages of a claim. So I've talked about from a personal perspective, but I am a lawyer, so I'm here to talk about the legal side of things as well. So from a legal perspective, what's the difference? Well, it adds the extra layers of complexity in terms of which jurisdiction should a claim be run in, which law is applicable, and what standards are applicable. But that's all absolute legal jargon. So what does any of that mean? So on the next slide, I've set out some definitions to help with this. So jurisdiction is where can the claim be brought, i.e., which country's courts can the claim be brought through. The next one is applicable law. So, which country's law should be applied to the claim? Now, people think that that might be interchangeable in the sense that if you're bringing a claim in England, English law applies. That's not the case at all. You can absolutely have a claim being run in England applying Spanish law, German law, Austrian law. So, identifying those from an early stage is really important. In some circumstances as well, local standards might be the applicable um, standard that we look to see whether there is liability against a defendant or not. So when we talk about local standards, it's what is the standard in that country? So for example, in Spain, it could be a requirement that all hotels have to clean public toilets 5 times a day. That might not be set out in legislation or in case law, but it could be that all hoteliers just know that, and that's something that they all comply with, and that would form the local standard. So it's more than just what does the law say, it's what is the standard. And that's particularly important because if you do have an injury or an incident in for example, a hotel, the hotel is going to be working towards Spanish standards. It's not going to be English standards. So there's absolutely no point in applying English standards to a hotel that's based in Spain. It will need to be Spanish standards in those circumstances. So when we talk about local standards, it's the country standards from where the incident has occurred. It doesn't encompass everything because we'd be here for weeks and weeks if I was to talk about all the different variables that could go on in a travel civil claim. But these are the essential steps that I wanted to take you through. So the first one is the initial investigations. There's a lot more initial investigations in a travel claim than there is in a domestic claim. The first is in relation to jurisdiction. So we need to assess which country's courts the claim needs to proceed through. Slater and Gordon are an English law firm, so if the claim cannot be pursued through the English courts, the English or Wales courts, then we can't assist with the claim, unfortunately, and it would have to go to a foreign lawyer to run it in their foreign jurisdiction if that is the correct jurisdiction. Sometimes a client could have multiple jurisdictions that could apply, and in those circumstances, we'd be advising the individual from the outset to say, you could bring a claim here in England, for example, or you could bring a claim in such a jurisdiction, and we would help them navigate the benefits and the risks to the two jurisdictions so that they could make an informed choice before they decide. It's not about Slater and Gordon and us trying to push them through the English courts. If it's more appropriate for them to go through a foreign jurisdiction, we'd absolutely tell you that. The next thing that we look at is applicable law. So what law applies to the claim? And that's really important because that's going to set out the parameters moving forward for the evidence that we're looking to obtain. But it's also really important to know from the outset because it applies to limitation periods. So for those who don't know, limitation periods are a set time frame which a claimant has to make a claim. And if you miss that period, you may be statute barred from being able to bring your claim. So it's really important that we know that deadline so that it's not missed and we can advise our clients accordingly, whether they're still in time for that, whether they've missed it, or that we know what we're working towards. Now, that limitation period is usually set out in law, is set out in English law, but each countries' laws are different. So each country has their own limitation period. Some can be as short as 12 months, some can be as long as 10 years. So it's really important for us to know that early doors. The other initial investigations that we do would be into the defendant as well, because when you're dealing with foreign defendants, you need to make sure that they are viable. And what I mean by this is you want to make sure that they've got money or assets to be able to pay any compensation that they may be ordered to pay, because there's no point in pursuing a claim against somebody who has nothing to meet any judgment that might be ordered against them. The next is contact with the defendant or the insurer. So, for a domestic claim, you're looking at 21 days for a defendant to acknowledge your claim once you've sent them the appropriate letter, and then 3 months for them to investigate liability. But for a travel claim, it's different. The time lengths are doubled. So, that means there's 42 days for the defendant to acknowledge your claim and then 6 months to investigate liability. So, it's not going to be a quick claim, unfortunately. These are complex matters that we're dealing with because you are dealing with foreign jurisdictions, so they get longer to respond on liability. But when you're dealing with defendants or insurers that are based in other jurisdictions, they're really unlikely to engage. They're not likely to come back to us, but we still have to give them that 42 days and 6 months to consider and to try and come back to us as well. So, what are we going to do during that time? Well, the first thing that we'd do is look at rehabilitation. We'd look to instruct a case manager early doors to help us understand what requirements are needed for the individual, what rehabilitation would help them, what care needs would help them, what medical experts they need to be seen by. That's really important because it's a team effort at the end of the day bringing these cases. It's not just Slater and Gordon, it's Slater and Gordon, the individual's support network, and any treatment providers, whether that's private or NHS provided. So we've all got to work together. So us all knowing from the get-go what is going to be best for the individual is going to be really helpful moving forward. Then we've got liability inquiries. So here we would look either into foreign liability reports or local standards evidence, depending on the nature of the case. Again, if the foreign law applies, we're looking at the foreign law for liability. We can't apply English law to those cases, so it'd be a case of getting an expert lawyer's report, maybe a accident reconstruction report, anything that we need to help support liability in those circumstances, or like I say, a local standards report if that is appropriate. Then expert evidence, which is more the medical side of things. So any sort of medical expert like orthopedics, psychologist, neuropsychologist, anything like that, that would be appropriate for the individual dependent on their injuries. But this could also encompass things like employment experts, care experts, depending again on the nature of the losses that have been sustained and the injuries that have been sustained. Then we move on to financial losses. So whilst doing all of that, we also look to obtain your financial losses as well. So this, I like to call it, is out-of-pocket expenses. So anything that you've incurred as a result of the incident. So this could be a loss of earnings. It could be, ambulance charges, hospital charges if you've not had travel insurance or the GHIT card to help cover those. It could be, going to hospital appointments. It could be any adaptations that you've needed to have to your house, things like that. So we'd look to collate all of that and put it into what's called a schedule of loss, along with evidence to support the same. And that evidence would form things like receipts, invoices, even bank statements, whatever we can to demonstrate those costs that you sustained, to try and recover them from the third party. Then I've included foreign quantum evidence because, and I've put if applicable, because this is needed in some cases if a foreign law applies. The foreign law doesn't just apply to liability, but it's also to the value of your claim as well. So we wouldn't be able to value the claim. We'd have to send it to a foreign lawyer for them to value the claim in accordance with their laws. And that can be quite interesting, because some countries do not offer compensation for certain heads of loss. And an example I like to give for that is in England, we would compensate for future medical costs. We would compensate for psychological injuries. In other countries, those two are usually the ones that cause the most issues, because a lot of other countries do not compensate for those, or it's in very specific circumstances that they do. So it can very much vary depending on which country you're in. So that's a really vital and important step. Once we've done all of that, then is the time to be making offers to try and negotiate a settlement. If we can't settle the case, or if the third party has not responded to us, we would have to commence court proceedings, which will ultimately end up in a trial for a judge to determine liability or to determine the value of your claim, or both. And then once we have been hopefully successful with the case, then we could look at any advice on investments or trusts. And we actually have our own in-house court of protection team that would be able to offer any advice or trusts that is needed as well. So these are the common questions that I usually get asked by people. So I'm just going to run you through them. So what funding agreements are available? So usually we would offer a conditional fee agreement. It's also known as a no-win, no-fee agreement, which does exactly what it says on the tin. If you're successful with your case, you do pay something. If you're not successful, you don't pay anything. This is a great funding agreement because it means that the individual doesn't have to pay something up front. Any compensation, any deductions is from compensation, rather than, like I say, you paying it out of your own pocket. But in some circumstances, if you have travel insurance, which is another benefit, you may have what's called legal expenses insurance. And if you do, then better funding terms could be offered to you to avoid any deductions to compensation. And as part of our responsibilities as litigators and as solicitors and the like, we need to make sure that we're acting in our client's best interests. So we will ask you to provide copies of your travel insurance documentation for us to look through, because we understand that it can be quite confusing. There's lots of different paragraphs and legal technicalities throughout these documents, and we will look for legal expenses insurance and let you know whether it's applicable or not for you. And if it is, then we can give you the relevant advice as to funding the claim and what your options are. The next one is, will I have to attend a medical appointment or rehabilitation abroad? Well, if the claim is being advanced through the courts of England and Wales, then no, we would always try and get a medical appointment or rehabilitation that's close to home for you, so that you don't have to travel too far, and you definitely won't have to travel abroad for it. Obviously, if the claim is being brought through a foreign jurisdiction, then that is a possibility. Similarly, for if you'll have to attend trial abroad, again, if the claim is going through the courts of England and Wales, then no, it would be your home court usually. But if the claim is being brought in a foreign jurisdiction, then possibly. How long will my claim take? So usually most cases take about 2 to 3 years, but some can take longer depending on the nature of the injury sustained and the complexities of the claim. So, in my experience, claims that proceed through the jurisdiction of England and Wales are quicker than other countries, because I have seen it where some countries like Turkey can take 10, 15 years. It can be crazy. So I think that 2 to 3 years is not too bad when you compare it to other jurisdictions. But I appreciate for the individual that might seem like a long time, but hopefully you'll have seen from the other slides there's a lot that has to be done for us to be able to get to the end. Um, how much compensation will I receive? Again, it's really difficult to say. It's all about injury sustained and associated losses. And especially with travel claims, again, if a foreign law applies, then the claim will need to be valued in accordance with that foreign law. So we wouldn't be able to tell you a precise amount from the get-go, but we'd obviously keep you updated as matters progress. And as soon as we know, we would advise you to let you know the sort of ballpark that you're in, what offers we think that you can make, what would be realistic for your claim, as soon as we know. But like I say, there's a lot to get through before we can actually get to that point. So I thought I would consolidate all of this into some case studies for you. So the first one that I wanted to bring to your attention was about a client who was quite a high performing member of her organisation. She was incredibly smart, advancing very quickly, working across multiple departments, business leads, and her career trajectory was amazing. She was going to be CEO within 15 years. She went on holiday with a partner. They were crossing a road when they were struck by a vehicle, and she sustained significant injuries, including brain injury, multiple fractures to her leg, ankle, and spine. So, in terms of the brain injury, the effects that this had on her was that it was difficult for her concentration, and she had an inability to spend prolonged periods of time in front of a computer. She would easily suffer with fatigue. She had environmental sensitivity, so she'd become overwhelmed quite easily in certain environments, or if there was too much concentration. And she also noticed personality changes as well. She would become increasingly frustrated and she was very short tempered. But similar to Mark, if you were to speak to her, you would not have been able to tell that she had a brain injury. She would speak to you like any normal person would do. You would not know that she had any of these symptoms. So, in terms of her career, it really affected what she was doing as she couldn't stay in that job for much longer. So, she bounced around for a couple of different roles, but found that working for an employer just was not suited to her. It didn't accommodate her new limitations that she was having to factor in. And so, she felt that it was best for her to set up her own company. Now, the positives with this was that it allowed her to work as and when she wanted to, or when she could, to accommodate her symptoms and rest when she needed to. But the negatives of this was that it was a brand new business. You know, it's really difficult to start businesses from the get go to gain traction, to get the clientele, and especially given that this was around COVID time as well. So she had that to contend with. In terms of the complexities to her claim, so the incident occurred in Germany, so German law applied to her claim, both to liability and to quantum as well, so to the value of her claim. Liability was initially denied. The defendant suggested that she was jaywalking, which wasn't allowed in Germany, so she wasn't using a pedestrian crossing to cross the road. We had to obtain evidence from accident reconstruction experts, German law evidence as well on liability to help support the same. The medical evidence was complex as well. There was orthopedic experts, neurologist experts, plastic surgeons, neuropsychologists. The list was endless in terms of experts. There was just a few there that I've put down on the slide, but there were many more. We also had non-medical experts as well, including employment experts, to be able to show the difference between what her career trajectory would have been had the incident not happened compared to what her career trajectory would be now that the incident has happened, and care experts as well, because she struggled with day-to-day life, even simple tasks like walking the dog, cleaning, gardening, things like that. So care experts were really vital to assess these needs. And then overall, we had to get a German lawyer back in to quantify the claim and to advise us as to the appropriate value that the claim would be worth under German law. So, how did Slater and Gordon assist with this? Well, from a claim perspective, we contacted a foreign lawyer immediately. She was in Germany at the time, and she was being told by the German police that she had 90 days to pursue a claim, which is not the sort of limits or restrictions that you want put on you after you've just had such a serious incident. So, thankfully, she'd contacted us early doors, and we put her in contact with a German lawyer who provided advice to say that there was no requirement for her to do that in 90 days. It was a sort of scheme that was available to her, but actually wouldn't benefit her. And they didn't advise her to follow it at all. So we could communicate that to her, and she had the option to not go through it, but she knew her choices then, rather than trying to be forced into it by the German police. We provided her with advice on her options for jurisdiction, because she did have the option to bring the claim in Germany if she wanted to, or through the courts of England and Wales, and she chose the courts of England and Wales, which is why we were able to act. But she was able to make that informed decision. We instructed a case manager at an early stage as well, to assess her immediate needs and to help coordinate treatment. We obtained statements, police reports, and evidence to support the claim. And we even obtained interim payments as well at the earliest stage possible to help support treatment and to help set up any additional needs that she required. So, from a client's perspective, how did we assist? Well, because of her brain injury, we wanted to provide her with as much space as we possibly could do and to help facilitate this claim as best as we could do for her. So, we provided her with home visits when she requested them, or meetings in public spaces that were a productive environment for her to be able to process the information that we were giving her. I think I actually met her in a pub that she chose close to home. It was a great environment for her. She felt comfortable there. She brought her dog along for emotional support as well. And I think that really helped her engage with the claim, to be able to be her best self, to help understand these complex issues that were going on so that she could provide informed consent and informed decisions in respect of her claim. We offered regular breaks as well, as and when she needed. So when we were having long conference calls with barristers or experts or anything like that, we'd say to her, right, let's have a break every 30 minutes. If you need a break beforehand, let us know. That's no problem. Or if at the 30-minute mark you feel like we can still carry on, then let us know and we can do that. It was all very much based on the client's timing and how she was feeling to try and help accommodate her where we could. And the other thing that I think was really essential for this was giving her plenty of time to review documentation at her own leisure. With the fatigue and the struggles with concentration, you may get documents that are 30, 50, 100 pages long. You need time to process that, and that could take days, that could take weeks. So we would try and give her as much time as we possibly could do to get through the documentation so that she felt still really engaged with the claim. She knew exactly what was going on and she had that support from her legal representatives. That was the first case study that I wanted to discuss with you. The next one is in relation to a young boy who was on holiday with his family in Spain. Him and his brothers were playing in the hotel's arcade room when he climbed onto one of the machines. It wasn't affixed to the floor or the wall, and the machine's fallen on top of him. And as a result of the incident, he suffered fractured skull bones, intracranial contusions, left-sided facial palsy, left-sided hearing loss, damage to the pituitary gland leading to diabetes insipidus, and psychological symptoms as well. But that's all a lot of medical jargon. So how did that actually affect him? Well, it meant that the left side of his mouth lacked movement. He was unable to fully close his left eye. He had no hearing in his left ear. He had a brain injury as a result, so he suffered with things like fatigue, struggling to concentrate, anger management issues, clumsiness, and the evidence currently shows that he's 12 years old now with a reading age of 6 and a writing age of 8. And he's also suffered with bedwetting at this age because of the diabetes insipidus as well, which is awful for anybody, but for such a young lad, it was a really distressing case, to be honest, to read through the medical evidence. But his family, absolute troopers, they're biggest supporters of him. So with this claim, the complexities involved, Spanish law was the applicable law. We were able to bring the claim through the courts of England and Wales, so that helped. Liability was initially denied. The hotel was saying that the arcade room was not owned and operated by them, and they were suggesting that he was the author of his own misfortune because he was climbing on the machine unsupervised. So we had an uphill battle there. Complex medical evidence as well. So the defendant alleged that there were some learning difficulties pre-incident, and so that will be a challenge to determine any differences between that and what has been caused by the incident. His age, unfortunately, was also a complex issue with this case because he was so young at the time of the incident. We couldn't know the full extent of his injuries, and a lot of the medical evidence suggests waiting until after puberty to fully know the extent of everything that's been sustained. So, how did we help? Well, from a legal perspective, we were proceeding to a preliminary hearing to address liability, to suggest that the arcade machine was not secure to the floor as it should have been, and that the machine was owned and operated by the hotel, and that they had a duty to their guests to make sure that that arcade machine was secure. We obtained witness statement from people in the arcade at the time. We pushed for relevant disclosure documentation from the hotel as well. And we obtained Spanish liability expert evidence, which meant that we were able to concede liability on a 70-30 basis for him, which means that at the end of his claim, once we've valued everything and we've got either a judgment or we've agreed on an amount of compensation, he will only receive 70% of that compensation to account for the fact that he was 30% contributory to the incident. We're currently obtaining appropriate medical evidence to address his injuries and future prognosis, but I must warn you that this is an ongoing matter, so I don't have all the information to hand. But on the next slide, please, Mark, we talk about how we help from a individual's perspective. So from his perspective, we instructed a case manager to complete the immediate needs assessment and to go out to the client and his mum to find out what help he needed. We obtained early interim payments to help fund rehabilitation, specifically tutoring for English, maths and science. We liaised closely with the client and his family to understand his needs as he got older, and he actually began to struggle with the tutoring sessions, likely due to his brain injuries. And through the use of the case manager, we were able to find a program called Code Ninja. Now, I'd never heard of this before, but it was a more hands on and engaging tutoring session to help with more day-to-day lessons and life skills. So as practical skills like problem solving, collaboration and communication, persistence and resilience, and creativity and innovation, which he appears to be engaging really well with. So us being able to find alternative methods to assist him, I think works really well. Unfortunately, like I say, this matter is still ongoing, so it's a case of we're going to have to wait and see what happens with this. Um, but hopefully, he continues to engage with the programming for us to get a for the medical experts to be able to give prognoses so that we can get him some appropriate compensation for the injuries that he sustained, which are probably going to be lifelong. So that is the end of my second case study. So I just wanted to end this presentation by talking about Slater and Gordon and what we can actually offer to anybody who's suffered an injury, whether it's a domestic injury or abroad. Specifically for the travel team, we are renowned in and experienced in travel, serious injury and fatality claims. Obviously, Slater and Gordon have a myriad of different departments. We're a multi-service law firm. We all interact with each other. So, for example, if we're dealing with a fatality claim, we do have wills, trust and probate to help families go through the probate process. We do have a court of protection team to help with any trusts that need to be set up, and usually if you utilize our services for those whilst bringing the personal injury claim, the cost of that can be included as part of the personal injury claim, and it's all, like I say, in-house with one firm, avoids you having to go to multiple different lawyers and trying to keep up with that. One place can deal with everything. We provide additional support with in-house rehabilitation coordinators as well. We have a wide network of foreign lawyers, which, as you can see through the previous slides, having that network is vitally important to the work that we do, the reason we're able to bring these cases. So having a strong network is really important, which we've been able to foster and develop over the many years that we've been doing this type of work. Various rehabilitation as well, rehabilitation, like I say, coordinators to help with that. Media support, especially if the incident is going to be reported in the foreign jurisdiction or even here in England. We have media support on hand that will work with the family or the individual as much or as little as they want. Some people may just want to put a single sentence out and leave it there. Some people may want to engage more. They'll provide as much support as possible. They'll help try and restrict media where it needs to be restricted. Like I say, that's all in-house and that support is free for our clients to utilise. And we actively support and liaise with unions and charities. We know how important, the work is to the individual who suffers these horrific injuries and tragic accidents, and we want to be there to support as much as we can do, and that's why we work with specifically charities to try and extend our reach as much as possible so that people know what their legal rights are, and that there are facilities out there like lawyers to help support them, not just in the context of a legal perspective, but all the additional support that we can offer as well. So thank you very much for your time. That is the end of my presentation. On the last slide, yes, I've just put there my contact details in case anybody wants to take them down. we've also got a brochure that I'm going to be sending to Mark as well. So if anybody's interested in that, it provides a bit more information as to what we do in travel law. So you can have a flick through that if you'd like to. But I'm, like I say, I'm more than happy. If anybody's got any questions now, I'm happy to answer them. If not now, you can contact me by phone or email, and I'll always try and help as much as I possibly can do.
Oh, thanks, Hannah. That was so informative. I've been sitting here writing questions down as well myself. So I think the biggest takeaway for me, and we were saying this beforehand, is just get that travel insurance. Is number one, isn't
Absolutely.
it?
Absolutely. I can't recommend it enough. I really can't.
Mm,
And it's only for
yeah,
a small amount. It's usually what, like 20, 30 pounds, something like that, for a single
yeah,
trip cover. It's just, and the amount that it covers you, people always think, oh, I'm not going to need that. I'm healthy, I'm fit, I'll be fine. It won't be an
yeah,
issue. It can happen to anybody. It really can, at any age, at any time. And that's why I use the examples that I used, because you can see it happened to somebody who was exceptionally young, a child, which you wouldn't expect it to happen to, and to
yeah,
somebody who is potentially going to be, a high flying CEO. It just can really vary. It can get anyone.
absolutely. I mean, two things for me really as well. My story when you read out that case study one was so many things were familiar there because at the time I was a freelance school speaker traveling all around the country, and I literally came back, and the first week of September, so 6 weeks after my accident, 5 or 6 weeks after my accident, I had to travel to five different schools in five different locations, and that included like Liverpool and Lincolnshire. And I remember thinking, I don't know what to do because if I don't do this, there's nobody that can cover me. So they'd have to cancel them 5 bookings.
Yeah.
Also, I'd have lost, some money. And September was always a lucrative month for us. So I was really, really stuck with that. And again, it changed my business because that relationship ended up breaking down in the end because I couldn't travel anymore. I was getting fatigued. I was making lots of mistakes. So there's always things like that. And then again, being self-employed and then setting up our own business, I could feel what that lady's going through there because all of a sudden you're thinking, right, I need to do this alone. But running a business is, yeah, it's great because you can go and switch off in the afternoon if you're feeling really, really tired. But it's not as easy as that because you still need to do stuff and you still
Yeah.
need to, yeah, go to a client meeting or, I mean, we carried on in school, so I couldn't just walk out of a school halfway through and say, look, do you know what, I'm feeling a bit fatigued now. Well, I've got
Yeah.
200 kids with me. So things like that are so, so difficult. But the other thing as well is when you said about the travel insurance, I actually passed out on a plane, which is completely unrelated to brain injury or anything, and my blood pressure dropped. And we were halfway into a flight, and the staff on the plane, the cabin crew were absolutely fantastic. And I'm going to be really honest with you, so were the other passengers. So many people just kept coming and checking on me, making sure I was okay. And I was laid
Oh,
out in the
that's
seat.
lovely.
People were bringing me drinks and water and stuff like that. And they couldn't have been any better. When I landed in Lanzarote, and they'd radioed ahead to a medic who got onto the plane, took me off the plane, put me in a wheelchair and all this. I mean, I was doing the usual thing. I'm fine, I can walk. Took me through to the medical room, and then I got taken to hospital to have a full assessment. Now we had private insurance, private medical insurance, which covered everything that the hospital had done. It was a private hospital, and as I was walking out the door, they went, "Oh, because your ambulance wasn't requiring you an overnight stay, it wasn't an emergency, so therefore there's €200 bill for the ambulance." And I was almost sort of thinking, well, I didn't really need that because my friend was in the airport waiting to pick us up. She could have taken us to the hospital. At this point, it had been about 2.5 hours since I'd passed out. So it wasn't like I was in danger or anything. But they made that call to put me in an ambulance and then charged me for it. Thankfully, I got the money back in the end after going to our private insurance. But it is just things like that. If I had no insurance, the EHIC might have covered me or the GHIC might have covered me for the general stuff, but I just still had to pay it out of my pocket.
I mean, and I'm talking about it from a claims perspective where there's a third party involved. If there's no third party involved, there's obviously nobody to bring a claim against. So having travel
Absolutely.
insurance in that perspective is really important.
Yeah.
And I think it's also raises a really interesting point as well, because we've had it before where people have had an injury abroad, and they've not requested to go to a specific hospital, they've just been taken by
Yeah.
ambulance, turns out to be a private hospital, and their travel insurance then refuses to cover the cost of the treatment there because it is a private hospital rather than a public hospital. So
Yeah,
when I say about talking to your travel insurance from as soon as possible, obviously in those circumstances, it might be quite difficult, but once you know your position and if you can find out early, you could then always ask to be transferred to make that a possible. Travel insurer might help with that transfer as well, rather
yeah,
than stay at the hospital potentially for weeks racking the bill that your insurer is not going to pay. So really
yeah,
speaking to them early on is really vitally important to understand the parameters of what they're willing to cover and what they're not willing to cover.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Another question I thought of, this was one for me as well, is because we used to have an E111, then it was an EHIC, and it changed its name. Now it's a GHIC, isn't it?
Yes.
So I'm guessing global health insurance cover, that covers you pretty much anywhere in the world for basic medical cover.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have to have your travel insurance on top of that for extras.
It's because the UK left the EU, so that's why it's not the European health insurance card anymore for UK citizens, but it's the global health insurance card instead.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
doesn't cover every country though. I would caveat that. So it covers most European countries
Yeah.
and a few others, but it doesn't cover absolutely every single country. So look into that as well.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's about just doing that little bit of research beforehand.
Mhm.
And again, I mean, I remember like going back to travel insurance. I had travel insurance included on my bank account at one point. A lot of them do that.
Yeah.
They're not always that particularly expensive. If you travel regularly, we used to get an annual policy before we had that one as well, which was about £80 or £90 a year. It was incredibly cheap. So stuff like that is real peace of mind.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
got some nice comments there. So, Susan said thank you, and Claire's also said that she has a travel insurance and brain injury details on there, so declared that as well. And Catherine's put on there that she has a travel insurance and EHIC, suffered a TBI in a yoga retreat in Italy, 10 weeks in a coma, woke to military police at my bedside
Wow.
and forming me affidavit that I'd be sworn having to leave. I mean, I'm just reading that there, what you've put, Catherine, and that is incredibly scary.
Yeah, it
And
really
then
is.
also having to go to court, £60,000,
Wow.
and it says, the yoga retreat was ultimately found responsible. And I think that's always the thing, isn't it? Because you know straight away when you put a claim in, there's a fair chance that somebody's going to say it's not my fault, it was yours,
Yeah,
and you can
most
debate that.
cases get denied. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but that sounds really, really, really scary what you went through there, Catherine. So
It does bring up another good point, though, that I would like to mention that if anybody is abroad and you're ushered with something to sign, a statement or anything, don't sign it. If you don't understand it, if it's in a foreign language, you must insist on getting it translated before you even think about signing it
yeah,
because you don't know what you're putting your name to. And it can be quite intimidating if, officials like police or whatever are ushering paperwork in front of you. Um, and having the support of lawyers on side of you saying you don't have to sign that, I think is really really important because people feel coerced otherwise into signing it, and it can cause problems later down the line. So if anybody is ever in that situation, please do reach out to a solicitor's firm to get that support, and please insist on having the document translated as a minimum before you sign
yeah.
anything.
But yeah, and then Victoria said thank you. She's not travelled since um, stroke, but we're looking to travel insurance carefully and GHIC. And I think it's that thing as well, because again, after my brain injury, the first thing I did was I contacted the insurance company we were insured with and said, I've had a brain injury, am I affected? And I think because I don't have any physical disabilities, I had to answer a few questions. And they said, no, it's absolutely fine. But also my son's coming here, and I told Hannah this before today. My son's coming to visit us because we live in the Canary Islands, and he said, I don't need any insurance because nothing is going to happen. And we badgered him. He actually paid £16 for a policy for a week.
It's
And
so
funny
cheap.
enough, yeah, his daughter, our granddaughter's just broken her foot today. Now I
Oh
think
gosh.
it's a minor fracture, so I think she's going to be okay to come here. But even stuff like that, he would lose the money on his flights if she couldn't travel. And
Yep.
You know, again, it's like,
Absolutely, it covers so much. There's no reason not to take it out. It covers so much. So yeah, I
yeah,
highly recommend travel insurance. I really do.
definitely. But yeah, thank you, Hannah. We've had some good questions in there as well. And I mean, again, I always say this cliche at the end of a Slater and Gordon webinar, but I learned so much from it. So I'm sure that you guys, if you're here with us live or you're watching this back as well, then you're going to get so many good insights. So massively thank you again for giving up so much of your time this evening.
No
And
problem
just,
at all.
oh, fantastic. Just to let you all know that Brain or Shine, you can find everything we do on brainorshine.com. And I'll just pop the link in the chat there. That will lead you to future webinars. We also have the next one with Slater and Gordon next month is on employment law, which is also something that massively sort of affected me through my freelance contract. And I didn't know where I stood with that at the time. So it's something I'm keen to find out a bit more about. Also, it links to our regular podcasts. We also have a blog and a regular newsletter you can subscribe to. We have our fatigue hub, which we just launched, and there's been some teething issues, I think is the word. We're going to be relaunching that very soon as well. So it's still there, but we just need to put it onto a different platform. So look out for that as well. And if you need to get in touch with us, you can do through brainorshine.com. If you want to get in touch with Hannah, do that through the contact details on Slater and Gordon, or come to us and we'll put you in touch. And one thing I would always say about these guys, having had this relationship for just over a year now, the legal jargon does go out the window and the personal service comes in, and you will find so much help and support. And we've had testimonials from people that have contacted Slater and Gordon for advice and what have you, that have got in touch with us personally and said how easy it is to deal with you guys. So do reach out, and if there's a question, there's no such question as a silly question, is there? So
No, absolutely not.
just ask and make sure you know what you're doing. So
100%.
but thank you, everybody. Have a lovely evening, and we shall see you all very soon.
Thank you, everyone.